Though, shifting gears to Jack Eichel. And I've got a little snippet from Elliot Friedman, has a really, really good piece. 31 thoughts, what caused the disconnect between Eichel and Sabres. So, quote, what we know, Jack Eichel dropped a neutron bomb on the Buffalo Sabres as the team's captain revealed Monday that he's, quote, a bit upset about the way that things have been handled since I've been hurt. There's been a bit of a disconnect from the organization and myself. And I only remember the last time Jack Eichel played, but it has not been for a while. And there were trade talks back then, and the rest of this, it probably digs the hole a little deeper. Another thing from Eichel himself here, the most important thing is trying to get healthy and figure out a way to be available to play hockey next year, wherever that might be. Continuing the article, what we want to know, why did Eichel do it? Here's the best Picasso I can paint. According to multiple sources, Eichel had a contentious exit with the organization. No one is commenting, but it's believed he is exploring on the advice of his medical team, an artificial disc replacement in his neck. The Sabres are apparently, this is not part of Elliot's article, the Sabres are not interested in this at all because there's been no history of an NHLer coming back from this injury. Now, later in Elliott stuff, they've talked about some other athletes and then some bits from Johns Hopkins Medicine talking about the procedure itself. We don't need to go into that. We're not doctors. But anyway, and in the CBA, apparently this was rectified when the last CBA was done, players now have the right to get a second opinion, but the Sabres in no way want this to happen because they want Jack Eichel to play hockey. Along these lines, too, we'll get to these players in a bit, but Sam Reinhart sounds like he wants out. Rasmus Ristolainen said he wouldn't mind if they traded him. It feels like he's been saying that for a couple of years.
Yeah, like the last 7 years.
Yeah, the way they've been treating him. I asked this question to you guys a couple months ago. Then I don't remember which one of you, but one of you put a poll up. I remember in a response to Elliot Friedman on the Twitter, which everyone should go follow. And we had a poll asking people, writing off Elliot's coattails for the responses about this question. So I'll ask it again here right now, and maybe we can ask this question if they do hire Quinn later down the line. Has Jack Eichel played his last game as a Buffalo Sabre?
Yes. And I think that he's given all he can to this team already. And it's not like it's just, they that Jack Eichel and they're like, that's it. Like in terms of the draft, they've been blessed with draft picks. Even when they went a bit off the top 5, they got someone like Dylan Cousins who's coming in, but they just couldn't make anything work there. And I think it's time for Buffalo to kind of really reassess that. Yeah, it's time to get what assets we can. They still have, like, the ball's still in their court in terms of his contract and what they could trade him for. But I think it's kind of time for Buffalo to kind of reassess that they can't build through Jack Eichel, especially when you see those types of comments that he had from there, when he said wherever that may be. I think for me, that was like the nail in the coffin. And what you've mentioned before already, Adam, it starts with Jack Eichel, but it also goes down to the other players too, where it's a culture thing. These other guys don't want to stay there either. So I think that it's time to kind of reassess and just change everything.
I agree with Daniel. There's nothing that they can do. And I think I brought up David Quinn, and I think that could be a last-ditch effort. But that coaching staff is just the start. There's so much wrong going on in Buffalo. I don't remember if it was Leafs Hour or Hockey Central, they were talking about it. You have to feel bad for Jack Eichel because look at the guys who have left. Ryan O'Reilly left, won a cup, and then won the Conn Smythe. Apparently he was close with Bogosian. I believe there was the termination, signs in Tampa Bay, wins a cup the next year. Yep. That same year. So, like, he's watching people leave the organization and succeed.
Yeah.
And it's not really Kevin Adams' fault. I think Kevin Adams was given this roster. He brought in Taylor Hall, who was supposedly, like, he was the best forward going into free agency is what we were all told. And it still didn't work. What is there for the team to do to fix any of this?
And you know what? And maybe he could have gotten return assets, and then he blew the Hall trade. And naturally, like we all knew it was going to happen, Hall has gone to Boston and has been lights out good. That's pretty annoying. And then Friedman also tweeted out this stuff because Kevin Adams spoke to the media today. Buffalo GM Kevin Adams is making a statement on Jack Eichel. Says Sabres want Eichel to be healthy, had no problem with the second opinion, and there was a constant communication. Says doctors agreed on a conservative rehab approach. Adams backs their expertise, feeling Eichel could avoid surgery, confirms that Eichel and his reps have considered a different option. That's a cervical disc replacement. The team is not comfortable with it because there is not a history of NHL players coming back from it. It just kind of like from an Eichel point of view here is because listen, I don't know. It's just because I've heard so many cases of this with football in the NFL, but it's just and the NHL players are sort of lucky to have guaranteed contracts, but if it's health, especially with something like a cervical like disc, like that is. If it's that serious that the team are actually thinking of, or not team, that isn't Eichel's representatives are thinking of this kind of surgery, man, it's his body. If he needs the surgery, get the surgery. Look at Oscar Klefbom. He pushed back the surgery in his shoulder. We don't know if he'll ever play again. Victor Hedman is pushing back surgery, apparently. We don't know what's going to happen with him. I mean, who knows what Tampa Bay are going to look like, because I want to really mention how I don't think it's slam dunk they're going to beat Florida. I actually think the Panthers are going to win, but we'll talk about that later when we get to the playoff preview, ladies and gentlemen.
Sorry, Adam.
No, go ahead. I was gonna shift gears to Reinhart and Ristolainen there, but if you have more on Eichel, go ahead.
Yeah, I think just one more point before we shift gears is if I'm Jack Eichel in this situation, like you said, in terms of my body, in terms of my health, I'm going to do what's best for me. But the way I see things is the way the communication's kind of been is you're rushing me to come back based on how serious this injury is. But the question is, what am I coming back to? What is this team that's going back to? Because a big thing I've been thinking about with you guys as well is in terms of asset management, when you keep bringing in these guys to try to build the Jack Eichel, is I also remember Evander Kane, where they traded so many assets for him and then he didn't want to return either. And then they traded him for what became the 31st pick in the draft.
So let's just remind ourselves, you know what, you always want to look at where organizations started in an era, you can say, and where they've ended. So when the Buffalo Sabres drafted Jack Eichel, everyone remember, where did they finish in the standings?
Dead last.
Now, if this is indeed Jack Eichel's last game, where are they finishing in the standings?
Dead last.
Dead last.
They are last by 6 points to the Anaheim Ducks. They have not taken, and we had Will on, and he talked about that, compared to that Sabres team that was, as many experts have said, traded every goalie that made a save, Jeff Merrick, shout out to you, they have not gone anywhere. Like, even with, a good young goaltender like, why can't I remember?
Linus
Ullmark, thank you. Even like Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen's a younger guy. They're kind of in dire straits to save Dahlin. Granato has done a great job with them, but still, I mean, they're unhappy with, Reinhart looks like he's done. Again, we've talked about so much with Rasmus Ristolainen, and then it's like, okay, great, Middlestat wants to stay. You kind of already screwed up the beginning of his career too. Yeah, great, Dylan Cousins. He just got out the World Juniors for the love of all things. Like, he's not the player that should be like, oh, hey there, next year going in, the guys who are going to be carrying this team, Dylan Cousins. Like, I remember at the World Juniors, we were talking about like great leader, the moment when, the camera was coming around and like he turns away. Who's the Colorado defenseman?
Bowen Byram.
I can't remember anyone today. When Bowen Byram was crying at the silver medal stuff, and he turns away like, great kid, great character, but he's a kid. Is he even 21 yet, Dylan Cousins?
No,
no.
I think he just turned 20.
Yeah.
And that's it. Like, and this was the big problem with going back to Buffalo when they went scorched earth. There's no way of setting a culture there. It's just losing and losing and losing.
But I think I look at Buffalo and I look at Detroit, because Detroit went like they did a similar thing to Buffalo. They tore that thing right down to the bottom, with the exception of Larkin and Bertuzzi at this
Franz
point,
Nielsen.
right? And Franz Nielsen. But what they did is they brought like it was Ken Holland, and say what you want about Ken Holland in terms of what towards the end of that tenure, but he is a good general manager, and they replaced him with Steve Yzerman, who's going to create a culture there. What they've done in Buffalo is the complete opposite of that. They haven't brought in anybody who's going to create a culture. They've seemed to bring in all these guys with not a whole lot of experience. And I looked at what they did with what the Pagulas did with the Bills and bringing in the right people. That's what they have to do here. They have to bring in the right person to build this franchise back up. And that starts with whether it's a general manager / president, or you have a president of hockey operations and a general manager. That's what you need to do.
You need a vision of where you're going.
That too.
Another part is just like, and it goes to your point there, Alex, the revolving door of head coaches and GMs. It kills any sort of chance to build an identity with your team. Listen, rebuilding teams, the first one you think of right now is the two big ones I can think of rebuilding teams and how well they have gone. The great examples of rebuilds have been Toronto and the Rangers. The Leafs had Bozak. They had Van Riemsdyk. They held on to those guys. Even with the goaltending, Fredrik Anderson had a career at Anaheim. Like, never forget. Like, there were people saying, how could you get rid of him? You have John Gibson. And, and the Rangers, they still had for a good while, they eventually traded Matt Zuccarello, but, you still had Chris Kreider. You still had Lundqvist until there was a guy who was ready to step in, Shesterkin. I mean, we'll see how the Rangers go from here. Right. They clearly are changing vision and rebuild, but we'll see.
Say what you want about this guy in particular in terms of how he looks at hockey, but you know who would have been a great hire for this team as a president?
Would it be a certain Brian Burke?
Brian Burke, yeah.
He'll tell everyone to put on their big boy pants.
He would have set that franchise straight.
I just think you got to think of how much would it take to get him in, though.
Right.
Yeah,
a lot of money.
He would. Yeah, I would. Well, guys, the Buffaloes. Sorry. Go ahead.
I think and we used a joke before where I think they need that type of management that knows how to pivot, because they've shown in the past they know how to, taking it all down to the studs, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they don't know how to pivot. And I think of The Godfather, where Tom Hagen's, where he's not what is it? Alex is no wartime consigliere.
He's
not that. So they have to get someone that, once there's a bit of a sense of foundation, they know how to pivot moving forward, but they don't have either of those.